I once believed that intelligence was the shortest path to power. I believed that if I read more than others, understood faster than they did, spoke more sharply than they could, then sooner or later I would be respected. I thought that as long as I was good enough, the world would automatically make room. But then I started realizing something very uncomfortable. The smartest people around me were rarely the ones who truly held power. They were the ones staying at the office the latest. They were the ones fixing mistakes for the whole team. They were the ones who always had the right answer in every meeting. But in the end, they still had to bow their heads to someone less sharp than they were, someone who spoke less, understood less, sometimes even dumber. But that person had something they did not have: power. At first, I thought that was unfair. I thought this world rewarded excellence. I thought competence would create position on its own. I was wrong. And maybe you are wrong too. Because this world does not run on logic. It runs on emotion, on ego, on the fear of being replaced, on the deeply human discomfort of standing next to someone who makes you feel small. I did not understand that before. I used to walk into a room wanting to be recognized. I answered too quickly. I corrected other people's mistakes too easily. I argued just to prove that I was right. I thought I was building value. In reality, I was only building caution. People smiled at me, but they did not truly want me to go far. They listened to me, but they never fully trusted me. I was not underestimated because I was not good enough. I was underestimated because I made other people feel smaller. And that is the most dangerous trap of intelligence. Smart people usually do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because they need others to see that ability too much. They are addicted to being recognized. They are addicted to the feeling of winning arguments. They are addicted to being the smartest person in the room. But in the game of power, the person who needs to be seen is always the weaker one. The truly strong never need to prove it. They let others talk. They let others think they are in control. They stay silent long enough to see the entire board. That was when I understood a cold truth. Being admired and holding power are often two different paths. You can be the person the whole room acknowledges and still be the first one removed from the game. Or you can be the most underestimated person, but in the end, be the one standing above everyone. And that is where everything begins. Not by learning how to be smarter, but by learning how to make others believe you are not dangerous. Because sometimes, the strongest mask is deliberate stupidity. I used to think that if I was right enough times, other people would have to respect me. It sounded logical. If I could spot problems faster, solve them better, and prove it more clearly than anyone else, then why would I not be the one chosen? Why was I not the one getting promoted? Why was the person being listened to the most not the most capable one? It took me a very long time to understand that, in most rooms, people do not choose the person who is the most right. They choose the person who makes them feel the safest. That is a hard truth to swallow, because it means intelligence, the thing I once saw as my strongest weapon, can sometimes be the very thing that gets me removed from the game the fastest. Smart people often make the same mistake. We believe value must be seen.
that if we do not speak up, others will not know we are capable. That if we do not correct mistakes, others will think we are weak. That if we do not defend our opinions to the end, we will be looked down on. And so we walk into every conversation like walking into a courtroom, always ready to prove, always ready to argue, always ready to win. But the problem is, no one likes living next to someone who constantly makes them feel like they are losing. You can win an argument and at the same time lose that relationship forever. You can prove that you are right and also prove that the person across from you feels stupid standing next to you. No one forgets that feeling. I used to do this a lot. I corrected small mistakes that did not need correcting. I interrupted just to add a more accurate detail. I reacted immediately when someone said something I believed was wrong. I called that honesty. I called that high standards. But if I am honest, it was just ego disguised beautifully. I did not want truth to be protected. I wanted myself to be recognized as the one who saw the truth. That was the real problem. The trap of smart people does not lie in IQ. It lies in the addiction to recognition. We do not just want to be right. We want other people to know that we are right. And the moment that happens, power starts leaving our hands.
Because the person who needs validation is always the one who is dependent. They need other people's eyes to feel valuable. They need external victories to maintain internal stability. And anyone who needs something can be controlled through that very thing. This is why extremely intelligent people are often easy to manipulate. Just give them a stage to prove themselves, and they will walk into the trap without anyone needing to push them. A small provocation, a meaningless argument, an opportunity to show others who they really are, and they take the bait immediately. Not because they are weak, but because their ego is starving. I used to be like that. I used to think winning meant making other people admit my worth. Now I understand real victory is no longer needing that. The strongest person in the room is usually not the one who speaks the best. It is the one who does not need to speak to prove anything. They observe. They let others reveal themselves. They understand that every time you try to shine too early, you are turning yourself into a target. And in the world of power, standing out too early is often not an advantage. It is an invitation for resistance. I started learning how to stay silent, not because I knew less, but because I started understanding that not every truth needs to be spoken immediately. Some battles, winning with words is the fastest way to lose with position. And that was when I saw the deeper layer of the problem. It was not that I needed to be smarter. I needed to understand how people react to other people's intelligence. Because sometimes what destroys you is not your ability, but how you make other people feel when that ability appears. And that is exactly where the smallest signals begin revealing your entire position in the power game. I used to think power was decided by big moments, a brilliant speech, a perfectly timed decision, a victory big enough to make everyone look at you differently. But then I realized most people do not judge you by the big moments. They judge you by very small signals. The things you do that even you barely notice. A text message you reply to too quickly. An explanation that is too long when no one asked. A moment when you rush to prove you are not wrong. A small argument where you cannot stand having to stay silent. Those are the things that reveal your true position on the power board. I had committed almost all of them. If someone texted me, I replied immediately. If someone misunderstood me, I explained right away. If someone underestimated me, I tried to fix that perception. I thought that was being proactive. I thought that was protecting my self-worth. But no, I was only sending one very clear signal. I need you to think well of me. And that is a weak position. People with power do not react quickly. They react selectively. They do not live in constant proof mode. They do not rush to fix every misunderstanding, because they understand one thing. The more you need to control how others see you, the more you are handing that control to them. I used to not understand why some very ordinary people were respected by everyone. They were not the smartest, not the best speakers, not the hardest workers. But when they walked into a room, the energy changed. People naturally paid attention, not because they tried to impress, but because they did not need to. That calmness created power, while just one seen message without a reply was enough to make my mind spiral. What did I say wrong? What are they thinking about me? Should I send another message? That was not affection. That was emotional dependence disguised very subtly. The more someone needs quick feedback, the easier they are to control. The more someone fears being misunderstood, the easier they are to lead. Because simply by withholding recognition, other people can already control your behavior. I also used to have another dangerous habit, always needing to be the one with the final explanation. I could not stand someone misunderstanding me. I wanted to clarify, wanted to prove, wanted to end everything by making the other person understand that I was right. But the older I got, the more I realized. Strong people do not try to fix every perception. They let time do that work. They understand that people with real value do not need to constantly advertise themselves. Only people afraid of losing value do that. There is another microsignal even more dangerous. Always available, always ready, always there, always easy to reach. It sounds beautiful, but in reality, too much availability lowers perceived value. Anything that is always there is rarely appreciated. I used to think always helping, always showing up, always supporting would make people respect me more. Wrong. It only taught them that I would always be there no matter how they treated me. And people learn very quickly to undervalue what has no risk of being lost. Uncontrolled presence creates disregard. Scarcity creates value. That is why sometimes silence is stronger than explanation. Withdrawal is stronger than pursuit. No reaction is stronger than resistance. Because power does not lie in what you say. It lies in what other people feel when you say nothing. I started changing through very small things. Replying slower, talking less, explaining less, no longer trying to win every argument, no longer chasing the need to fix every look. At first, it felt very uncomfortable. My ego fought back violently. It wanted to be seen, wanted to be recognized, wanted to be validated as important. But that was exactly when I understood. The most dangerous thing was not other people underestimating me. It was my need for them not to. And when I looked deeper into the workplace, I realized the place where this trap kills the fastest is not friendship, not love, but the place where we spend most of our lives. I used to believe that the fairest place in the world was work. There, I thought results would speak for themselves.
Whoever performed better would be recognized. Whoever solved problems better would be given greater opportunities. Whoever had more ability would go further. It sounded very reasonable, and also very naive. I remember very clearly a meeting a few years ago. The whole room was stuck on a problem. Everyone was arguing in circles, but no one was really touching the root of it. I knew the answer. Not because I was a genius. I had simply seen it before. I sat there for a few minutes, and then my ego started speaking. If I say it now, everyone will see my value. I need them to know that I am the one who can solve this. And I spoke. Very clearly, very logically, very accurately. The whole room went silent. My boss nodded. Everyone agreed. I walked out of that meeting with the feeling of victory. I thought I had just taken one step forward. In reality, I had just pushed myself further away from the power table. In the following weeks, everything changed in very small ways, not big enough to name, but clear enough to feel. I started being left out of a few important emails. A few strategic conversations happened without me. Promotion opportunities slowed down. My boss was still polite, still smiled, but one thing had changed. He no longer felt safe with me nearby. That was when I understood a very cold rule. Your boss does not hate you because you are good. Your boss hates the feeling you create when your competence makes their position feel fragile. In a power system, a superior's insecurity is the most dangerous thing in the room. You can be loyal. You can have absolutely no intention of taking power. But if your presence makes them feel threatened, all logic becomes meaningless. People do not protect truth. They protect their position. And many talented people fail simply because they do not understand that. They think work is a test of competence, when in reality, it is often a test of emotion. The person who gets kept is not always the most capable one. It is the person who makes the one with power feel the most comfortable. I used to resist this. I called it office politics. I looked down on it. I thought only weak people needed that game. But then I understood. It is not a game. It is human nature. And refusing to understand it does not make you more noble. It only makes you easier to remove. I started observing the people who truly moved up. They were not the people who talked the most in the room. They were not the people who always gave the first answer. They did not fight for the spotlight. They knew when to stay silent, knew when to let the boss be the one who discovered the idea, knew when to ask a question instead of giving a conclusion. That was not fake. That was strategy. Instead of saying, "This is the best way," they said, "What do you think if we try this direction?" Same idea, but a completely different feeling. One creates defense. One creates ownership. People protect what they feel belongs to them, not what you try to prove is right. I learned that sometimes the fastest way to kill a good idea is to attach your name to it too clearly. The ego wants recognition immediately. The person who understands power wants the result to survive long term. Those are two different games. There is another trap even more dangerous: the burden of being competent. When you constantly prove you are capable, the first reward you receive is not promotion. It is more work. Lazy people will come to you. Weak managers will lean on you. They praise you for being excellent, while quietly turning you into the intellectual mule of the whole system. You solve everything. They receive the peace. You burn out. They keep the position. I lived in that trap for a very long time. I thought I was building credibility. In reality, I was only training other people how to use me. And that was a very expensive lesson.
At work, if you always show up as the firefighter, people will not see you as a leader. They will see you as the person who always has to put out fires for them. A huge difference. From that point, I started learning a strange skill, strategic incompetence. Not doing poor work, but not letting people automatically assume you will carry everything. Not solving every problem. Not rescuing every crisis. Not turning yourself into the default answer for other people's laziness. Because energy is power, and if you spend all of it on other people's battles, you will have nothing left for your own life. I realized that, at work, being right matters less than who feels safe. Being skilled matters less than who controls perception. And sometimes, the smartest move is to let other people think you are not too smart. But work is only one part. Outside the office, in personal relationships, this trap quietly destroys even more. I used to think that in relationships, honesty was strength. I believed that if I was right, I should say it. If someone was wrong, they needed to be corrected. If a conversation could be made more accurate, more logical, clearer, then that was what should be done. I called that sincerity. I called that maturity. I called that authenticity. But then I started realizing something very uncomfortable. People did not walk away from me because I was wrong. They walked away because around me, they always felt like they were wrong. That is a very big difference. I used to be the kind of person who could not tolerate even a small wrong detail. Someone told a story and got one detail wrong. I corrected it. Someone used the wrong concept. I fixed it. Someone gave an illogical opinion. I challenged it immediately. I thought I was making the conversation better. In reality, I was only turning every conversation into a test. And no one wants to live next to someone who constantly makes them take exams. You can be right, but people will only remember how they felt after that conversation. Did they feel understood or judged? Did they feel connected or diminished? People do not bond with you because of your intelligence. They bond with the way you make them feel about themselves. That took me a very long time to understand. I used to wonder why some very ordinary people were loved by everyone. They were not deeper, not sharper, not more interesting, but people were always drawn to them. Because around them, people felt comfortable. Around me, people felt like they had to defend themselves. That is a very subtle kind of loneliness. You still have friends, still have conversations, still receive compliments about how smart you are, but no one truly opens up. No one fully relaxes. No one really sees you as a safe place for their ego. And then you confuse that with, people are not deep enough to understand me. No. Many times the problem is not that they are shallow. It is that you love standing in the higher position too much. I remember one time a friend told me about a terrible decision she made in love. I saw the problem immediately. I knew exactly where she had gone wrong. I analyzed it very logically, very correctly, very sharply. She listened silently, nodded, thanked me. And then after that, she never shared anything with me again. At the time, I thought she just did not want to face the truth. Now I understand. She did not need a judge. She needed a human being. I chose being right over being close, and I lost that relationship. That is the biggest trap of intelligent people. We get so used to solving problems that we forget not everyone is looking for solutions. Many people are only looking for safety, presence, empathy, a place where they do not have to feel smaller. But the ego of smart people struggles to accept that. It wants to win, even in love, even in friendship, even in conversations that were never supposed to have a winner. I used to argue with the person I loved just to prove I was right. I won the logic and lost the peace. I used to correct family members because I could not tolerate small inaccuracies. I kept the precision and lost the softness. Some things do not die immediately. They simply wear away. Closeness, trust, the desire to stay near each other. All of it dies very quietly. Not because of one great betrayal, but because of hundreds of small moments where you make someone feel like they are not enough. No one forgives the person who makes them feel stupid, even if that person loves them. That is why people who truly understand power in relationships do not try to prove they are superior. They know when to stay silent, know when to let small mistakes go, know how to let others keep their dignity. That is not weakness. That is control at a higher level. I started learning how to nod instead of correct, learning how to ask more instead of conclude, learning how to listen without turning everything into an analysis session. At first, it was very difficult. My ego always wanted to jump in. It wanted to be recognized as the person who understood more deeply. But slowly I realized, being loved and being recognized as intelligent often do not come together. You have to choose. Either become the person everyone admires from a distance, or become the person they truly want to be close to. And that was when I understood an even deeper layer. The problem was not who I was. It was how other people felt when they were around me. In the world of power, perception is always stronger than reality. I spent many years trying to become someone good enough. I tried to be more honest, more hardworking, more capable, more reliable. I thought that if I myself was good enough, clean enough, clear enough, then other people would see that. I thought that as long as my true self had enough value, everything else would work itself out. But then I realized a very cold truth. Most people do not respond to your true self. They respond to the feeling they have when they are around you. That means you can be completely sincere and still be seen as dangerous. You can be not arrogant at all and still make others feel judged. You can simply be trying to live by your own standards, but in other people's eyes, you are an uncomfortable reminder of what they have not achieved. People do not hate truth. They hate the feeling truth creates. I used to not understand why some people disliked me the moment they met me. I had done nothing to them. No arguments, no conflict, but they already kept their distance. I used to think it was a misunderstanding. Now I understand many times it is simply the natural reaction of the ego. Your presence can accidentally touch someone else's insecurity, and the ego always protects itself before it looks for truth. If around you they feel less knowledgeable, they will not call that learning. They will call that discomfort. If around you they feel less in control, they will not call that growth. They will call that a threat. That is why perception is always stronger than reality. Not because people are stupid, but because emotion always comes before reason. We decide through feeling. Then we use logic to justify it. I used to try changing other people's minds with truth. I gave arguments, facts, clarity. I thought that if I explained well enough, they would understand. Wrong. If someone already feels unsafe around you, every argument only makes them more defensive. You cannot logic your way through an emotion that the ego is trying to protect.
That is why the more some people explain, the more they are misunderstood. The more they try to prove they are harmless, the more others believe they are hiding something. Because the energy of defensiveness is always felt before the content of words. I fell into that trap before. I wanted everyone to understand me correctly. I wanted to fix every wrong perception. I wanted to control how others saw me. But that is a battle with no ending, because you cannot control everyone's perception, and the more you try, the more position you lose. Strong people do not chase after fixing every look. They focus on controlling presence. They understand that power does not come from people thinking you are good. It comes from how they feel when you walk into the room. Some people walk in and the whole room relaxes. Some people walk in and everyone immediately adjusts their posture. Not because of title, not because of money, but because of energy. Presence speaks before words do. I started observing that more. People who truly have influence usually do not try to impress. They do not demand attention, but they create gravity. Other people adjust themselves around them, and the secret is this: they are not trying to be liked. They control the emotion their presence creates. If you are always trying to be liked, you become predictable, easy to manipulate, easy to lead through the need for acceptance. But when you are no longer addicted to recognition, you begin to have something far more dangerous: self-control. I realized that most of my failures did not try to be fate-believe. I realized that most of my failure did not try to be selfer and just trump them cacked. I realized that most of my failure did not try to be cleared. If you hope them to listen to her, the becomes like. I realized that most of my failure did not try to be predictive for them too. I realized that most of my failure did not try to be bloat something, but once given understand, bloat some clears with nothing. But specifically, I realized that most of my failures did not come from lacking ability. They came from making other people feel out of place standing next to me. That is an invisible war. No one says it. No one admits it. But it decides almost everything. Who gets trusted? Who gets removed? Who gets kept? Who gets quietly resisted? And once I understood that, I started looking at every relationship with a different question. No longer, what does this person think of me? But, what does this person feel when they are around me? That question changes the entire game. Because if perception is the real battlefield, then victory does not lie in becoming better. It lies in knowing when to dim your own light. That is when the most dangerous strategy begins to appear. Acting dumb on purpose. There was a time when I thought acting dumb was a sign of weakness.
I looked at people who stayed silent in arguments and assumed they were not sharp enough to respond. I looked at people who let others win and thought they lacked backbone. I looked at people who accepted being underestimated and wondered why they gave up their image so easily. I was wrong. Many times in life, what made me lose power was not that I lacked ability, but that I was too impatient for others to see that ability. I wanted recognition immediately, wanted others to know I understood the problem, wanted them to see I was not the kind of person who could be looked down on. But that very need made me easy to read, easy to predict, easy to manipulate. The truly dangerous person is not the one constantly proving how sharp they are. It is the one who makes you think they are not worth guarding against.
That was when I started understanding the true nature of acting dumb. It is not lowering yourself, it is controlling other people's perception, letting them see what you want them to see, and keeping the rest for the right moment. I started trying that in very small situations. In meetings, instead of giving the answer immediately, I started asking, "Could you explain this part a little more?" Even though in reality, I already understood it very clearly. At first, my ego resisted violently. It screamed, "If you do that, people will think you are less capable." But what happened was completely different. The other person started talking more. They relaxed more. They felt like they were in the higher position. And in that very moment, their defenses disappeared. People like the feeling of superiority. When they feel smarter than you, they no longer see you as a threat. They start sharing more than necessary, revealing things they should have kept hidden, showing you who they really are. Not because you are good at extracting it, but because they willingly lower their own defenses. That is a very quiet kind of power. You do not need to win the argument. You only need to make the other person believe they have won. And while they are enjoying the victory of their ego, you are collecting the entire board. I saw this most clearly in negotiations. Before, I walked in with the mindset that I had to prove myself. I spoke clearly, spoke sharply, spoke like I could not be dominated. I thought that was strength. In reality, that was the fastest way to make the other side build every wall of defense. When they realize you are intelligent, they immediately prepare for war. But when you walk in looking a little slower, a little awkward, a little less dangerous, they become arrogant. And arrogant people are always careless. They talk too much. They overlook small details. They believe they are controlling the game. That very belief is what makes them lose. I also learned that this strategy is especially effective with narcissists. A narcissist does not really need truth. They need superiority. They live on the feeling of dominating others. If you argue with them using logic, you are giving them exactly what they want. Your energy, your attention, a stage for them to feel bigger. But if you look at them calmly and say, "Maybe you're right," or "I haven't thought that deeply about it," everything collapses. No battle, no fuel, no game. And what narcissists hate most is when they cannot pull you onto their stage. Acting dumb here is not losing. It is refusing to play a game whose rules were written for you to lose. I used to think strength was reacting quickly. Now I understand strength is sometimes the ability not to react, to hold back the answer, hold back the sharpness, keep the entire knife in the dark. No one guards against someone they think is harmless, and that is the perfect disguise. History is full of people who survived and won because of that. Not by standing out, but by turning themselves into something no one felt the need to remove. I started looking back at many of my old failures. Most of them did not come from stronger opponents. They came from me raising my own hand and saying, "Look at me. I'm dangerous." I put the target on my own back. Just because my ego could not tolerate being underestimated. But real power does not need immediate recognition. It needs time, needs patience, needs the ability to let others misjudge you without rushing to correct it. That is a very rare discipline, because the ego always wants to be seen, always wants to be confirmed as special. And only when I started killing that need did I understand that my greatest enemy had never been other people. It had always been my own ego. I used to think the people blocking my path were others, an unfair boss, jealous coworkers, people with less ability but higher positions. I saw external power games very clearly, but I did not see the thing quietly destroying everything from the inside. The ego. It does not appear like an enemy. It appears like a very reasonable voice. I'm just protecting my self-worth.
I just don't want to be looked down on. I just want people to recognize my ability correctly. It sounds very justified and extremely dangerous, because most of the decisions that cost me the most power started with sentences like that. The ego does not want real victory. It wants to be seen winning. It does not care about long-term results. It only cares about the immediate feeling of being recognized. That is why it always pushes me into meaningless battles, an unnecessary argument, an explanation that is too long, an effort to fix how someone sees me, a rushed reaction just because I could not tolerate the feeling of being underestimated. Every time I thought I was protecting myself, in reality, I was only serving the addiction of the ego. And this is the most dangerous addiction. Not money, not love, but being recognized as intelligent. That feeling is incredibly addictive. When someone says, "You're really brilliant. No one thinks as deeply as you do. Good thing we have you," it creates a very subtle kind of dopamine. You start living to hear those words again. You no longer work for results. You work for validation. You no longer argue for truth. You argue for the feeling of victory. You are no longer building power. You are building a stage. And people who live on a stage are always dependent on the audience. That is the weakest position possible. I fell into that state without realizing it. I felt uncomfortable when someone else got recognition for an idea I knew I had first. I felt irritated when someone underestimated my ability. I felt restless if I had to stay silent when I knew I was right. All of it was the symptom of the same disease. I needed other people to confirm my value. And anything you need can be used to control you. As long as someone withholds recognition, you will start changing your behavior. As long as someone in power makes you feel like they can validate you, you will easily lose your calm. You will overdo it, say too much, try too hard, and in that very moment, you hand power to them. I started realizing that many highly successful people are not successful because they have less ego, but because they control it better. They do not react immediately when they are looked down on. They do not rush to fix every misunderstanding. They do not need to win every argument to feel valuable. They let results speak. They accept being misunderstood in the short term to protect position in the long term. That is what the ego absolutely hates. The ego wants fairness immediately. Power requires cold patience. The ego wants people to know who you are. Power wants people to realize it when it is already too late. I remember there was a period when I could almost not tolerate being underestimated. If someone spoke to me with even slight disrespect, I immediately wanted to react, wanted to correct the position, wanted to prove. But then I realized a very cold sentence. The people most easily offended are usually the easiest to control. Because if all it takes is touching the ego, you can pull them anywhere.
If one insult is enough to make me lose control, then the other person does not need to be stronger than me. They only need to understand me better than I understand myself. That is no longer strength. That is dependence. From that moment on, I started practicing something harder than everything else. Not dating is ego, but refusing to let the ego hold the steering wheel. I learned to let others think they had won, to let them keep their arrogance, to let them believe they had defined me. Because sometimes their underestimation is the best protection I have. People only defend themselves against what they fear, and if they do not fear you, they will give you a lot of space to move. That is where real power begins. Not when you are recognized as special, but when you no longer need that. When you can walk into a room and no one needs to know how dangerous you really are. That is when silence becomes the most frightening thing of all. I used to be the kind of person who could not tolerate silence. If there was a misunderstanding, I had to explain. If there was distance, I had to clarify. If someone changed their attitude, I had to know why. I thought that was maturity. I thought adults were supposed to face things, speak them out, solve everything with words. But then I realized, many times, my constant need to explain did not come from maturity. It came from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being underestimated. Fear of losing control over how others saw me. And any action that comes from fear reveals a weak position. I remember once someone started becoming distant with me. Shorter messages, slower replies. The energy had clearly changed. My old instinct immediately came back. What did I do wrong? What should I text to fix this? I need to clarify so everything goes back to how it was.
I almost threw myself into that conversation. A familiar conversation, explaining, defending, proving that I was not the problem. But that time, I stopped. For the first time, I chose silence. Not because I did not care, but because I started understanding something very important. The people who truly want to stay do not need too many explanations. And the people who already want to leave, every explanation only makes you look weaker. That silence was very uncomfortable at first. My ego screamed. It wanted action, wanted to regain control, wanted validation that I still had value. But the longer I stayed silent, the clearer I saw. Many things do not need fixing. They just need to be seen correctly. Not every distance is a misunderstanding. Not every coldness needs saving. Not every relationship is worth trading your dignity just to keep it. Silence is not passivity. It is the refusal to step into a game where the other person is waiting for your reaction. Weak people always react first. Strong people observe first. I started seeing that everywhere. The more someone needs to prove they are right, the more power they lose. The more someone explains, the more they make others believe they have something to defend. The more someone tries to hold on, the more they reveal their fear of abandonment. Desperation always has a very clear smell, and people sense it faster than you think. I used to argue a lot simply because I could not tolerate people misunderstanding me. I wanted to fix it, wanted to win, wanted the last sentence to belong to me. But now I understand. The person controlling the game is not the one who says the last sentence.
It is the one who decides whether that game is even worth entering. There are battles you win with words, but lose with position. You prove that you are right, but you also prove that you need that recognition. And that is failure. Silence creates something very special: space. And people hate space. They will fill it themselves with assumptions, with curiosity, with wondering what you are thinking. People who always say everything never get that advantage. They are too easy to read, too easy to predict, too easy to control. While people who know how to hold back always create gravity, not because they are intentionally mysterious, but because they do not see explaining themselves as an obligation. I started applying that at work, in love, in every small conflict. When provoked, I did not react immediately. When misunderstood, I did not rush to correct it. When someone tried to pull me into an argument just to feed their ego, I stepped out. At first, other people thought I had become weaker, less sharp, less caring. I let them think that, because I had learned that being underestimated is sometimes the perfect disguise. People only prepare for war against what they see as a threat, and if they think you are no longer dangerous, they will lower their own weapons. That is when you become truly free. Free to observe, free to choose timing, free to act without being pulled by temporary emotions. That is a kind of power most people never touch because they are too addicted to being understood immediately, too addicted to being seen correctly, too addicted to having to win in the present, while real power always plays the long game. It does not need applause. It needs position. It does not need to be liked. It needs the ability to move without being noticed. And that was when I understood the most important question. Do I want to be admired, or do I want to truly control the game? Because those two things rarely come together. And when forced to choose, most people choose the light. But real power is always built in the dark. I used to think success meant walking into a room and everyone immediately recognizing my value. I wanted to be admired, wanted to be recognized, wanted others to look at me and know that I was different. I wanted to be the smartest person in the room, the sharpest one, the one who could not be underestimated. And only much later did I understand that is not power. That is dependence beautifully decorated. Because the moment my value depends on other people's eyes, I have already handed control to them. As long as they stay silent, I start doubting myself. As long as they do not recognize me, I start trying too hard. As long as they underestimate me, I immediately want to react. That is not strength. That is an invisible chain. And the scariest part is, many people live their whole lives inside that chain without ever realizing it. They think they are pursuing excellence. In reality, they are pursuing validation. They think they are building an image. In reality, they are building a prison. I used to be like that. I wanted to win every argument, wanted to fix every misunderstanding, wanted everyone to correctly recognize my ability. I lived as if other people's judgment was the only mirror reflecting my self-worth.
And that is why I was always tired, always tense, always feeling like I had to prove just a little more. One more achievement, one more moment of recognition, one more small victory to feed a starving ego. But the ego is never full. It only learns how to demand more. Until I understood one very cold truth. The strongest person is not the one who gets the most attention. It is the one who can be underestimated and still not rush to correct it. The person who truly has power does not need to stand in the light. They only need to control where that light points. They let others show off, let others fight over attention, let others waste energy trying to be seen, while they build position, they build influence, they build power deep enough that they do not need to speak loudly. I started accepting a truth I used to hate. Sometimes the fastest way to rise is to accept letting others think you are not a threat. Let them look down on you. Let them underestimate you. Let them believe they are in the higher position, because that very arrogance makes them blind. No one defends against what they think is harmless. No one guards against someone they believe they already fully understand. And that is where real power is born, in other people's misjudgment, not through noise, but through deliberate silence, not through proving, but through observing long enough, not through taking the stage, but through controlling backstage. I no longer want to be the most admired person. I want to be the person who understands the board the best. The person who can walk into any environment and not be controlled by the emotions of the crowd. The person who can be called ordinary, even mediocre, but when the moment comes, everything is already in the right place. That is real strength. Not making people fear you immediately, but making them realize too late that they misjudged you from the beginning. If you understand this, you will start looking back at your whole life. The times you reacted too quickly, the times you tried to explain, the times you argued just to protect your ego, the times you turned yourself into a target simply because you could not tolerate being underestimated. You will realize many failures did not come from you not being good enough. They came from you needing other people to know that you were good. That is the trap, and also the door. Because the moment you no longer need recognition, you become very difficult to control. You step out of the game of validation and step into the game of power, where silence is stronger than words, where being underestimated is an advantage, where the winner is often the person who gets the least attention. So the final question is not, are you intelligent or not? But rather, are you strong enough to let other people think you are not intelligent? You can continue as you always have, or start looking at yourself differently from today. If you understand this, leave a point and tell me, do you think you are controlling the situation, or are you the one being controlled? Subscribe to Rise of Mind if you want to clearly see how the world really works.